Hey, Soul Stories fam. We've got a swoon-worthy love story for you today. Let's jump in and tell us, what city are you watching from? Lively music echoed through the vast Harvard auditorium. Thousands of seats were filled, with only a few left vacant. Black gowns and square caps flew into the air amid the cheers of families and friends. Everyone was laughing, hugging, snapping photos. Voices and applause turned the atmosphere into a festival. Simone panted, holding tightly onto little Amara's hand, weaving through the crowd while apologizing to people around them. "Hurry, Amara. Your Aunt Kiana is about to be called." "There she is, Mommy," Amara squealed with excitement, pointing toward the row reserved for undergraduates. Kiana, Simone's younger sister, stood out in her graduation gown, her face glowing with happiness. Simone smiled, her eyes blurring with emotion. Years of working late-night shifts, saving every penny to help her sister through school. This moment was worth it all. She bent down and whispered to her daughter, "Look, sweetheart, your aunt made it." Amara turned her head, her gaze wandering across the bustling hall. Then her eyes stopped on a man. Among the rows for graduate students, he sat upright in a gray suit with a neat red tie. But what caught Amara's attention wasn't his polished appearance. It was the three silent, empty seats beside him. While everyone else was surrounded by family and friends, he sat alone, like an isolated island in a sea of people. "Mommy," Amara tugged at Simone's sleeve and whispered, "why doesn't that man have anyone sitting with him? He looks so sad." Simone glanced over briefly. Indeed, the young man sat motionless, neither smiling nor speaking. His eyes were fixed on the stage but seemed lost somewhere far away. "Maybe his family couldn't come," Simone murmured, gently pulling her daughter's gaze back toward the stage. "Come on, let's cheer for Aunt Kiana." But Amara wasn't listening. She slipped off her seat and darted away. "Amara!" Simone gasped, her heart racing. But the little girl had already reached him. Suddenly, Amara stood right in front of the man, tilting her round face up at him. "Mister, why are you sitting all alone?" "My name is Amara. What's your name?" David froze. The innocent question struck him like an arrow straight into the deepest part of his heart. His eyes flicked to the two empty seats beside him. If it weren't for the accident years ago, his wife would be sitting here, holding their little girl's hand, cheering him on like all the other families. In place of the silent emptiness, there should have been laughter, clapping, and the joyful cry of "Daddy." His chest tightened. For a moment, all the sounds in the auditorium seemed to fade, leaving only heavy silence in his mind. "Mr. David finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "I just don't have anyone to come with me." Amara tilted her head as if unsatisfied with the answer. Then suddenly she beamed. "Then Mommy and I can sit with you. You won't be alone anymore." Simone rushed over, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. She tends to say whatever comes to mind. I'll take her back right away." "It's all right," David interrupted, his gaze softening. "If you don't mind, I'd be glad for the company." Simone hesitated, but when she caught the hopeful look in his eyes, something inside her softened. "Okay, but only if you're sure it won't bother you." David gave a small nod, the corner of his lips lifting into a rare smile, like sunlight breaking through thick clouds. Simone and Amara sat down. The little girl giggled, patting her tiny hand against David's. "Now you've got a friend." At that moment, he didn't reply, just nodded, but deep inside his chest, something long dormant stirred again. When the speaker's voice rang out, "David Bennett, Master of Business Administration," he rose, adjusted his suit, and stepped onto the stage. Thunderous applause filled the hall, but what made him falter was the clear, ringing voice from behind. "Go, David!" "You're amazing." A child's bright, innocent cheer was followed by the genuine clapping of a woman he had just met. And in that instant, David no longer felt entirely alone. The graduation ceremony ended in bursts of laughter and chatter. Students spilled out onto the campus, snapping photos, hugging bouquets, tossing their square caps high into the air. Simone was still struggling to spot her sister Kiana in the crowd when Amara once again ran toward David, grabbing his hand as if they'd known each other forever. "Uncle David, how are you celebrating?" the little girl asked, eyes sparkling. David looked slightly surprised, then gave a faint smile. Probably by myself," Going home, eating instant noodles. Amara's eyes widened. No way. Eating noodles on graduation day is embarrassing. I eat pizza. Melty cheese pizza is the only right way to celebrate. Simone hurried over, flustered. Amara, don't bother him. I'm sorry, she's so impulsive. But David just let out a small laugh. It sounded a little awkward, as if he hadn't laughed freely in a long time. It's all right. Actually, pizza sounds like a good idea. If you don't mind, I'd like to treat you both. A dinner to celebrate. Simone hesitated, ready to decline, but Amara squealed, See, Mommy, I told you. Graduation means pizza. The pizza place was just outside the campus gates, with red-painted walls and foggy glass windows, the rich smell of cheese and oregano wafting out. The owner, a round-bellied Italian man, broke into a booming laugh as soon as David walked in. Mr. Bennett, long time no see. Usual table? David nodded, gesturing for Simone and Amara to go ahead. Simone blinked in surprise. A millionaire? Familiar with the owner of a modest pizza shop? Amara didn't care. She darted straight for a wooden chair by the window, banging her hands on the table. I want a double cheese pizza. No triple. Can you even finish that? Simone laughed, ruffling her hair. Uncle David will help, Amara replied matter-of-factly. I'll give him a tiny slice. The rest is mine. David chuckled and handed her the menu. I'll save the cheese for you. I'll just eat the crust. No way, crust is boring. Amara shook her head furiously. You have to eat the sausage. That way you'll be strong enough to run with me. The innocent remark made David pause. For a moment his eyes darkened, but he quickly masked it with a light smile. All right then. Sausage it is. While waiting for the pizza, they ordered lemonade and salad. Amara chattered nonstop about everything, from her kindergarten stories to how a classmate brought in a kitten and how the teacher handed out candy. David listened, nodding, occasionally asking questions as if he genuinely cared. Watching the scene, Simone felt a pang of surprise. In the newspapers, David Bennett always appeared cold and aloof. Yet here, in front of her daughter, he was patient, even smiling, when Amara proudly described her drawing of a six-legged dinosaur. Uncle David, do you like dinosaurs? Amara asked. Of course, he said. I once wanted to keep a T-Rex in my backyard, but the neighbors wouldn't let me. Amara burst out laughing. Who keeps a T-Rex? What if it eats all the neighbors? Good point. David pretended to think seriously. Then maybe I'd keep a Stegosaurus. It only eats leaves. The whole table erupted in laughter. Simone realized suddenly that it had been a long time since she had laughed that much. When the pizza finally arrived, the hot cheese stretched in long, stringy strands. Amara shouted, Perfect! This is a real graduation party. Cheese smeared across her mouth as she ate, and David quietly handed her a napkin. You look just like me when I was a kid. My face was always covered in cheese after pizza. Really? Amara gasped. You used to eat messy too? Yep, and my grandma said that messy eaters grow up to be millionaires. Wow! Amara's eyes widened. She turned to her mom. Mommy, then I'll be a millionaire too. Simone laughed so hard she nearly doubled over. Yes, if you also study hard. David glanced at the mother and daughter, the corners of his mouth softening. A strange feeling rose in his chest. Warm, ordinary, simple, yet so very real. By the time they left the restaurant, the sky had turned dusky. Simone bowed her head slightly. Thank you for dinner. You really didn't have to. Simone, David interrupted, his voice deep and sincere. It's been a very long time since I've had an evening not spent alone. Actually, I should be the one thanking you. Amara slipped her small hand into his, cheerful as ever. Next time you'll eat pizza with me again, right? David looked into her bright eyes and, almost without realizing it, nodded. Next time, absolutely. And in that moment, he knew for certain this wasn't just a chance dinner. This was the beginning of something he thought he had lost long ago. The warmth of a family. The next morning, just as Simone finished brewing a pot of coffee, her phone buzzed. A message popped up, the wording a little formal. David, thank you both of you for the pizza. It's been a long time since I had such a pleasant evening. P.S. I bought a toothbrush to fight cheese mustache. : double parenthesis. Simone burst out laughing right there in the kitchen. She typed back, Simone, thank you for indulging Amara's triple cheese cravings. P.S. That mustache is an honorary title. Less than a minute later, ding. David, if you're free this weekend, I'd like to invite you to the aquarium. Amara said she prefers sharks to dinosaurs. I'm suspicious. Simone checked the clock. Her shift would end at noon on Saturday. She was about to decline on instinct. Keeping her distance was safer, but the next text arrived before she decided. David, not a fancy restaurant, I promise. Just the aquarium, popcorn, and, if needed, pizza crust for the grown-ups. She smiled, surrendering. Simone, Saturday 2 p.m. We'll meet at the aquarium gates. The aquarium was busy enough to be lively, but not crowded. Blue light shimmered from giant glass tanks, jellyfish drifting like silk scarves in the wind. Amara clung to David's hand, dragging him from one tank to the next, leaving her mother behind. Uncle, what's this shark called? Sharkington. Wrong, Amara said firmly. This is a sand tiger shark. I read the sign. David feigned shock. Apologies, Professor. Give me one more chance to redeem myself. That jellyfish over there is called moon jelly, Amara answered instantly, deadpan. Correct. He clapped like he'd just closed a major deal. Excellent student. Reward, popcorn. Simone came up, handing her daughter a glass of water. Slow down, sweetheart. Don't pull him over. It's fine, David said softly. I'm just learning how to keep up with my little teacher. At the Touch a Starfish station, Amara rolled up her sleeves, speaking in a mock announcer voice. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Amara Explores the Ocean. Today we'll touch on, oops. Water splashed everywhere as she pressed too hard. David shook his head laughing and handed her a tissue always prepared. Somehow, he always had tissues. Simone thought to herself, a man with tissues is a family man. They stopped at the glass tunnel. Fish swam overhead, lights flickering like a starry night sky. Amara leaned on the railing, her voice soft. Uncle David, what if there were dinosaurs underwater here? Then I'd buy more tissues. For what? To wipe my tears from being scared. Amara giggled, turning to her mom. I think he's joking, but it's like grown-up joking. Simone laughed. And how do you joke? Kid style. Loud and clear. Like boom. Got it, David said seriously. Note to self. Kid jokes equals boom. After the aquarium, they stopped for ice cream. Amara chose strawberry, Simone vanilla, and David mint chocolate chip because it sounded like a responsible decision. They sat on the steps, cool breeze mingling with the sounds of traffic and birds overhead. Oh no, Amara cried as her scoop tumbled off the cone, landing squarely in David's hand. He froze for half a second, then calmly caught it with a spare tissue. Simone shook her head. Are you the tissue man? I told you, David replied evenly. Tissues save the world. And save strawberry ice cream too, Amara added, plopping the scoop back onto her cone, leaving a pink smear on his sleeve. Sorry, Uncle. I'll wipe it. No, leave it, he grinned. That's the badge of the Strawberry Ice Cream Squad. Members only. But Mommy doesn't have a badge. David glanced at Simone's white blouse, hesitated a beat. Not everyone has to be covered in cheese and strawberries. True, Simone said, her eyes twinkling with humor. Families still need one clean person for the photos. And they did take one. A sun-dappled snapshot, a curly-haired little girl laughing loudly, a simply dressed man in a suit leaning in, a woman in worn scrubs with smiling eyes. At first glance, it was just a family on a weekend outing. Look closer, and it still looked like a family. The next week was the Science Museum. This time, David arrived early, holding a bunch of balloons in the shape of dinosaurs, hearts, and even an octopus. He wasn't sure why, probably because the vendor had offered a combo pack. I want the heart one, Amara pointed out immediately. The dinosaur is for you. You need to practice saying boom. Dinosaurs don't go boom, David corrected. Dinosaurs go grrr. They tugged back and forth at the strings until one looped tightly around his wrist. He fumbled, only tangling it more. Simone bent over, laughing until she choked. Give it here. Stop pulling. Copy that, he said, as serious as if taking orders in a boardroom. I'll stay still. Yeah, still, but still tangled. She untied it and patted his wrist. There. Even CEOs lose. To balloon strings sometimes. Exactly, David nodded. I officially acquired a new skill. Losing gracefully. Add ice cream eating without spilling, Amara chimed in. I've got tissues, he replied. Pro level. Inside, they built a dinosaur skeleton puzzle. Amara mistakenly stuck the tailbone on the head. David announced, this is a rare dinosaur species that thinks with its butt. They laughed so hard the guard had to shush them. So they laughed quietly, shoulders shaking, no sound. At lunch, they sat on the grass eating sandwiches. David listened as Simone told stories about night shifts, mothers carrying baby photos to ease their fears, and the old doctor who always wore heart-shaped earrings. He didn't cut in with advice like he might at work, just nodded, asking enough to show he was listening. Maybe for the first time, Simone realized there was a man patient enough to really hear her. It's been so long since I laughed this much, she admitted softly, as if afraid to break the fragile moment. Thank you. It's been so long since I had someone to text in the morning, he replied just as softly. Thank you both. Amara took a giant bite of her sandwich, muffled. Mommy, is Uncle David family yet? Not yet, Simone teased, pretending to think. He still has to pass the interview. What interview? David asked, dead serious. 3 questions, Amara declared like a judge, holding up her fingers. 1, are you afraid of the dark? Yes, unless I have tissues. Valid, Amara nodded. 2, can you tie the tiniest shoelaces in the world? I'll learn. 3, she squinted. Do you promise not to eat all the pizza toppings? David placed a hand on his chest solemnly. I swear, only the crust. All right then, Amara offered her hand. Welcome to the next round. Simone watched them shake hands, half amused, half touched. For the first time in years, she felt another grown-up standing beside her, laughing with her daughter, speaking the same language of joy. That evening, when he dropped them off, David parked under a tree, engine still running. Simone, he said slowly, I know I'm not good at talking about myself, but if you'll allow it, I'd like to keep having days like this. Just parks, museums, and strawberry ice cream. No pressure. Simone looked at him under the yellow glow of the street lamp. No pressure. Just don't teach her to eat pizza crust only. He chuckled. I promise. Amara leaned out the window, waving. Good night, Uncle David. See you in the next round. Good night, little teacher, he answered. The car rolled away. Simone stood for a moment on the sidewalk, hearing her daughter's laughter echo down the hall. For the first time in years, there was someone to text, I'm home. And strangely enough, the message came at once. David, home. P.S. Currently practicing how to tie shoelaces the size of a pea. Simone smiled, typing back. Simone. Good. Next round's harder. Learn to say, boom. The reply came instantly. David, boom. Simone laughed out loud. In the next room, Amara giggled for no reason at all. Maybe because the house felt lighter tonight. Maybe because they'd gained a new friend. Or maybe because somewhere, those 3 empty chairs were slowly being filled. Mother, daughter, and a man learning how to say boom. Late Sunday afternoon, Cambridge carried a slight chill, though the calendar still read early June. Simone had just finished a 12-hour hospital shift, her hands faintly scented with disinfectant soap. Her small apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old red brick building, about a 15-minute walk from Harvard Square. One tiny living room doubled as a kitchen, 1 bedroom, and a loft just big enough for Amara's bed. It wasn't luxurious, but it was warm. Crayon drawings filled the walls. Dinosaurs, rainbows, and one family picture with just 2 figures, a mother and her little girl, standing together under a sun with a wide smile. Simone had barely hung up her coat when a knock sounded at the door. Mommy, can I open it? Amara shouted from the loft. Wait, Amara, Simone called back, hurrying over. She blinked in surprise to find David standing there, holding a Whole Foods paper bag, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie undone. Good evening, he said, a little hesitant. I thought, You just finished your shift and maybe you hadn't eaten yet. Would you let me try making dinner? Simone blinked, caught between surprise and amusement. You? Cook? Yes. David raised the bag like evidence. Pasta, simple recipe. I watched 3 YouTube videos. Simone folded her arms, leaning on the doorframe, lips curved. You're a CEO, not a chef. Then tonight I'll be the CEO of the family kitchen. He said it with such seriousness that Simone burst out laughing. Amara came clattering down the stairs, hair a mess, squealing. Uncle David, did you bring food? Pizza again, right? No pizza, David crouched down to whisper, but spaghetti with tomato sauce and pumpkin. Amara wrinkled her nose. Pumpkin? I'm not so sure. Trust me, you'll like it. Simone shook her head, smiling. All right, but if the kitchen catches fire, you're cleaning it up. David nodded solemnly. I accept full responsibility. 10 minutes later, the little kitchen was filled with the smell of frying onions and smoke. Uh-oh. Amara covered her mouth, eyes sparkling with excitement more than fear. David held a pan of pumpkin but had forgotten to turn off the heat. Flames shot up, the pumpkin turning black. He fumbled with the handle before muttering, I think this is called the carbonized edition. Amara collapsed into giggles, rolling on the chair. Uncle, you just made charcoal dinosaur food. Quickly, Simone turned off the stove and set the pan in the sink. You've worked with numbers and stocks all your life, but you definitely shouldn't invest in pumpkin. David raised his hands in mock surrender. I agree, but let me try again. I can't let the dinosaur die unfairly. In the second attempt, he moved more slowly, following Simone's instructions. Soon the tomato sauce began to smell rich and savory. Amara still burst into laughter every time she remembered the flare-up, retelling it again and again. Uncle nearly turned our kitchen into a volcano, Mommy. When the spaghetti was finally served, it didn't look like the ads, but smelled heavenly. Amara took a bite, her eyes widening. Oh, it's really good. But next time, no dinosaur pumpkin, okay? David pretended to be serious. I'll take customer feedback into account. After dinner, the 3 of them washed dishes together. David insisted on scrubbing the burnt pan, while Amara dried the spoons and forks. Watching them, Simone felt something she couldn't quite name. For years, this kitchen had only known her and Amara. One adult quietly cooking, one child chattering about school. But tonight, a man's laughter threaded into the mix. Strange, yet somehow perfectly natural. She thought of the photos in the papers. David Bennett, the young CEO, always in a sharp suit, gaze icy as if the whole world were just another arena. But the man in her kitchen now, sleeves wet with soapy water as he scrubbed a pan, was clearly not that image. He looked ordinary. Ordinary in a way that felt comfortable. When the dishes were done, Amara, full and drowsy, plopped onto the living room rug. I want a bedtime story. All right, David said, sitting beside her. What story? A story about a dinosaur learning to tie shoelaces. David nodded, improvising. Once upon a time, there was a stegosaurus. He was huge but clumsy. He wanted to race with his friends, but his shoelaces always came undone. One day he met a little girl. Like me, Amara interrupted. Yes, exactly like you, David smiled. And she taught the dinosaur how to tie bunny ear knots. From then on, he could run like the wind, and he never forgot to thank the little girl. Amara giggled, her eyes drifting shut. I like that story. I want you to stay with me and Mommy forever? Her voice trailed off, fading into sleep right there on the rug. The room fell silent, broken only by the ticking clock. As Simone bent down to lift her daughter, her eyes met David's. Both froze for a moment, the child's innocent words hanging in the air. Simone managed a small, awkward smile, whispering as she carried Amara into the bedroom. Children say things that don't need to be taken seriously. David nodded, though his lips trembled faintly. I know, but sometimes children are more right than adults. Her heart skipped, but she only answered softly. Good night, David. Thank you for dinner and for the shoelace-tying dinosaur. He stood, taking his coat, his voice quiet yet steady. "Good night, Simone. Thank you for letting me be a small part of tonight." The door closed. Simone leaned back against it, her heart still racing. The image of him fumbling in her kitchen, nearly setting the pan aflame, laughing sheepishly at her daughter's teasing, it all seemed so far from the cold CEO in the newspapers. A stranger was slowly becoming familiar. That Sunday, Boston's sunlight gleamed golden, and the esplanade along the Charles River buzzed with life. Children ran about with balloons, adults spread picnic blankets, and street musicians played violins by the bridge. Simone led Amara to meet David, still clutching her Dunkin' coffee to stay awake after a night shift. David was already waiting under the shade of a maple tree, shirt tucked neatly into his jeans, holding a box of popsicles. This afternoon's contract, Riverside Walk, ice cream, and no burning pans, Amara squealed. "What flavor?" "Strawberry, as requested by my VIP client." David bent down to hand her the small popsicle. The three of them strolled along the riverbank, the breeze tossing Amara's curls as she ran a few steps ahead, laughing between licks of her treat. Simone and David walked behind, exchanging light conversation. To Simone, the scene felt like a dream. A man walking slowly by her side, listening as she talked about her night shift, the curious new nurses who gossiped about her love life, the onion soup in the hospital cafeteria. David listened attentively, occasionally tossing in a joke. "I think hospital onion soup should be classified as a weapon of mass destruction." Simone laughed, brushing his arm lightly. For a moment, she forgot the boundaries she'd worked so hard to build. Suddenly, Amara stopped short. Her popsicle dropped to the ground. She clutched her chest, her breathing sharp and shallow, her face paling. "Amara!" Simone cried, rushing forward, dropping to her knees to hold her. "Deep breaths, slowly now. Listen to Mommy. Slowly." David froze for a split second, then knelt beside them. "What's happening? What's wrong with her?" Simone looked up, panic flashing in her eyes. "Congenital heart defect. Her valve doesn't close properly. The doctors said she needs surgery, but I've been putting it off." David's heart wrenched. He watched the tiny girl pressing her hand to her chest, lips trembling, gasping for air. Just yesterday, she'd been skipping around, laughing until she fell over. And now this image cut through him like a blade. "Do I need to call 911? David asked urgently. "No, it's a mild episode. I know how to handle it." Simone held her daughter close, rubbing her back. "She just needs a few minutes rest. Steady breathing." Amara rested her head against her mother's shoulder, slowly calming. Her wide eyes turned to David, as if afraid he might panic. She whispered, her voice as thin as thread. "I'm okay. Don't worry." David was speechless. Never had he felt so powerless. A CEO commanding hundreds, signing multi-million-dollar contracts, was reduced to watching helplessly as a fragile child fought for breath. Once Amara settled, Simone carried her to a bench. She pulled out a water bottle, gently wiped her daughter's face, then turned to David, her voice low but firm. "You can't tell anyone, and don't even think about helping." David frowned. "Why not?" "Simone, heart surgery at Boston Children's could save her life." "I can." "No!" Simone cut him off, her tone sharper than he'd ever heard. "Who are you?" "A man I've only known for a few weeks. I can't let my daughter or myself become some invisible debt to you." "This isn't a debt," David burst out. "This is her life." "You think I could just sit back?" Her gaze dropped, her fingers tightening around her daughter's hand, trembling slightly. "You don't understand. A single mother like me? I'm used to people assuming I'm relying on someone. I won't let anyone say I traded my daughter's life for a millionaire's pity." David froze. He realized every word carried her pride and old scars. He wanted to argue, to shout that she was wrong, that this wasn't pity, but Amara's wide eyes staring up silenced him. The silence weighed heavily. Then Amara, as if oblivious to the tension, suddenly sat up and smiled faintly. "I want to run so fast that you have to chase me," she said, her voice weak but her eyes sparkling. "Next time, I'll beat you." David's chest tightened. That simple wish shattered the walls he'd built around himself for years. A child, heart-flawed, but still dreaming of running, laughing, playing like any other, struck him harder than any deal or report ever could. He nodded slowly, his eyes misting. I promise. Next time, I'll let you win. Amara smiled tiredly, then leaned into her mother's shoulder, drifting off. On the way back to their apartment, no one spoke. Simone carried her drowsy daughter in her arms, while David walked beside them, fists clenching as if to hold back a storm. At the apartment door, Simone paused, meeting his eyes. You're a good man, David. But please, don't interfere. I know what I have to do. He was silent for a long moment before replying softly. I'll respect you, but I won't stop worrying about Amara. She opened the door, carrying her daughter inside. Before it closed, David heard Amara's drowsy murmur. Good night, Uncle David. He stood in the hallway for a long time, staring into the darkened apartment, and in his mind only one wish echoed, that the little heart would get to run, to laugh, to live fully. Boston Children's Hospital shone bright in the morning light, but Simone's heart felt suspended in midair. The day had come faster than she expected. After a string of worsening episodes, the doctors decided Amara needed surgery immediately. Kiana had flown in from New York the night before, lugging a backpack stuffed with books and a bag of cheap snacks. As soon as she entered the waiting room, she rushed to hug her sister. I'm here. I won't let you face this alone. Simone tried to smile, but tears spilled anyway. Beside them, David stood a step back, holding out hot coffee for both women. At the operating room doors, Amara wore a star-print patient gown, clutching her mother's and aunt's hands. I'll be okay, right, Mommy? You're Mommy's superhero, Simone whispered, pressing her daughter tightly to her chest. Kiana kissed her niece's forehead. I promised I'd buy out an entire dinosaur store if you're brave. Remember that? Amara giggled, then turned to David. Don't forget, next time I'll beat you at running. The innocent words made all three adults choke up. David squeezed her tiny hand gently, promising, I'll be waiting for that day. The doors closed behind her. Simone collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Kiana wrapped an arm around her, while David quietly placed the coffee cup in front of her. Time dragged on like a century. Simone kept standing, sitting, wringing the hem of her shirt. Sit down, please, Kiana said softly. I'll check with the nurse. David watched her, and after a long silence, he spoke quietly. I know this feeling. I've sat in a waiting room before, waiting for news about the people I love most in this world. Simone looked up, startled. You have? David exhaled, eyes distant. I had a family once. Rachel, my wife, and Lily, my little girl, 4 years old. Simone froze. That night it was raining. I was driving, Rachel and Lily in the back. I got a work call. Just a few seconds distracted. When I looked up, a truck had drifted into our lane. I survived. They didn't. His grip tightened on the coffee cup, his voice breaking. I've carried that guilt ever since. If I hadn't answered that call, maybe they'd still be here. Simone covered her mouth, tears spilling. She had never imagined the wealthy, untouchable CEO she'd seen in the media bore such a devastating wound. I cut off everyone, friends, family, all of it. Only work remained, only numbers, because numbers don't cry, don't blame. I thought that way I could forget. But the truth is, I only became emptier. He turned to her, his eyes trembling. Until the day a curly-haired little girl asked why I was sitting alone. Amara reminded me I could still be someone's family. Simone couldn't hold back. She laid her hand over his. David, she whispered, it wasn't your fault. An accident is an accident. You survived. So you could be here today to bring a miracle to my daughter. David bowed his head. For the first time in years, he let the tears fall. Not the tears of a CEO broken down, but of a man finally allowing himself to hurt, to be weak so he could find strength again. The operating room door swung open. Dr. Rodriguez stepped out, pulling down his mask, face glowing. The surgery was a success. Amara is stable. We repaired the valve, and blood is flowing well. She'll need a few days to recover, but the outlook is very good. Simone burst into tears, rushing forward to hug him. Kiana cried too, wrapping her arms around her sister, then suddenly pulled David into the embrace. "Thank God," she sobbed. "Our family is safe now." David stiffened for a second, then squeezed her back. That one word family echoed in his chest, warmer than all the wealth he'd ever had. Simone looked up at him through her tears, whispering, "See? Even the darkness can retreat. We still have each other." David smiled, blurred with tears but genuine. He didn't know what the future held, but in this moment with Simone, with Kiana, with Amara recovering just beyond those doors, he knew he was no longer alone. Morning light streamed through the large glass window of the recovery room. The steady beep of the heart monitor echoed like a new rhythm of hope. Amara lay in the hospital bed, her cheeks flushed with color again, her breathing calm beneath a thin star-printed blanket. Simone sat right beside her, never letting go of her tiny hand. She had barely slept all night, yet behind her dark circles was a happiness she never thought she'd touch. Kiana was slumped in a folding chair in the corner, backpack hugged to her chest, hair spilling loosely across her face. The door opened softly. David stepped in, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. For the first time since she had met him, Simone saw his eyes rimmed red. Not from loss, not from haunting memories, but because life had just been returned. He stopped by the bed, gazing at the little girl still hooked up to eye felines, her lips murmuring faintly in a half-dream. Suddenly his dark brown eyes filled, and a tear slipped down without warning. "She did it," he whispered almost to himself. "For the first time. I'm crying because of something good." Simone looked up and saw those tears. No longer the icy CEO from the newspapers, just a man trembling before a miracle. She stood, gently resting her hand on his arm. "You didn't just save her. You saved me." David startled, turning toward her, but Simone continued. "I've grown used to being alone, used to being a single mom, handling everything myself. But when you walked in, I realized I could still lean on someone. You gave me the courage to believe I'm not alone." Tears brimmed again, but this time they were gratitude, not fear. Amara stirred slightly, her lashes fluttering before her eyes blinked open. She smiled weakly at her mother. "Mommy, I won. My heart is strong now." Simone burst into tears, kissing her little face over and over. "Yes, my angel. You won. You are the bravest warrior." Amara turned to David, her voice thin but radiant. "Uncle, you'll have to chase me. I'm going to run really fast." David laughed through his tears. He nodded firmly, as though making a vow to the world. "I'll lose to you anytime you want." The whole room laughed, even Kiana, who had just woken, rubbing her eyes. "What? Who's winning against whom?" Amara lifted a small finger weakly. "I beat Uncle David." Kiana smiled, stroking her niece's hair. "That's right. My little warrior always wins." In the days that followed, the hospital room felt like a temporary home. Simone still managed every meal and detail of care, but she was no longer doing it alone. David brought bags of fruit, little toys, and coloring books that Amara adored. He often sat beside the bed pretending to be a contest judge. "This artwork is a dinosaur in a dress. Creativity score, 10 out of 10. Amara giggled, her cheeks slowly regaining color. She began practicing sitting up, then taking a few steps around the room, cheered on by her mother, aunt, and Uncle David. Watching her daughter, Simone's heart swelled. For the first time in years, her small world no longer felt cold. There was laughter, another pair of hands to help when she was tired, another pair of eyes to share the worry. One night, while Amara slept deeply, Kiana lounged in a chair with her legs crossed and whispered to David, "You know, I never thought my sister would let anyone into her life. But looking at her now, I think she's starting to believe." David hesitated, voice low. "I'm not sure I deserve it." "No one's perfect," Kiana shrugged. "What matters is that you're here, honestly. And for Amara, that's enough." The day Amara was discharged, the Boston sky was a rare, brilliant blue. She wore the yellow dress Kiana had bought and clutched the teddy bear David had secretly placed on her pillow the night before. Simone held her hand as they stepped out of the hospital doors, sunlight spilling across their faces. David walked right beside them, carrying the bags of belongings. Amara inhaled deeply, as if to prove her lungs and heart were in good condition. Then she looked up and declared, "Now I'll start training to run. Uncle David, get ready." Simone laughed. "Sweetheart, you just left the hospital." "It's fine," David bent down, pretending to warm up like an athlete. "I'm ready." All three burst into laughter, a small family stepping into the sunlight, light-hearted as though they had just survived a storm. Simone held her daughter's hand, but her gaze drifted to the man walking beside them. Inside her rose an unspoken thought. Maybe the miracle wasn't only the successful surgery. Maybe it was his arrival at the right time to fill the emptiness she thought no one could replace. David looked back and caught her eyes. He smiled, a smile no longer stiff, no longer hidden behind the mask of a cold CEO. It was the smile of a man who had found family. That afternoon in the little apartment, Amara lay sprawled on the sofa, sound asleep after an entire day of laughter. Simone stepped out to the balcony where David stood, gazing at the sky dyed red by sunset. "Thank you," she said softly. David turned. "I should be the one thanking you." She didn't reply, just reached out to touch his hand. A light touch, but enough to make Simone feel as if the world had finally given her someone to lean on. Inside, Amara shifted in her sleep, murmuring, "Mommy, Uncle David." The two adults looked at each other, laughing through their tears. For the first time, all three of them felt they belonged to one another, and that was the first miracle. Loving this story belongs to Soul Stories. If you see it anywhere else, please come back to our official channel to enjoy it in full. In the days after Amara was discharged, the little apartment in Cambridge suddenly felt livelier than ever. David stopped by almost every day. At first, Simone was hesitant, a millionaire CEO stepping so naturally into her everyday life, and that of her daughter felt surreal. But Amara had no reservations at all. Every morning she would ask, "Is Uncle David coming today?" And most of the time the answer was, yes. One morning when the alarm rang shrilly, Simone was still groggy from sleep when she heard her daughter giggling in the kitchen. She hurriedly threw on a sweater and rushed out. David was fussing over a pan of pancakes, face concentrated as if running a board meeting. "My pancake is a little lopsided," he muttered. Amara burst into laughter. "Uncle, that looks like a yawning T-Rex." David examined his creation, then conceded, "Fine, dinosaur pancakes it is." Leaning on the doorframe, Simone chuckled softly. The scene felt strange yet deeply familiar. A man clumsy in the kitchen, trying to please her daughter with crooked pancakes, yet his eyes shone as if he'd just sealed a major deal. "You should change careers," Simone teased. "Open a pancake shop for kids." "Not a bad idea," David replied dryly. "I already have my first loyal customer right here." He pointed at Amara, who raised her hand as if she were voting. When it was time for school, David insisted on walking with them. He wore a simple shirt and cardigan, looking nothing like the CEO from the papers. Along the way, he carried Amara's backpack while she skipped ahead, singing. At the preschool gate, Amara proudly introduced, "This is Uncle David. He makes the best dinosaur pancakes." Some parents glanced over, one whispering, "Isn't that David Bennett?" But he didn't care. He crouched down to retie Amara's shoelaces, clumsy but patient, as if the rest of the world no longer mattered. Watching him, Simone felt something stir. It had been so long since she'd seen a man walk beside her in such simple, ordinary moments. That evening, after a modest dinner of pasta and salad, the three of them curled up on the sofa to watch cartoons. Amara sat in the middle, hugging her teddy bear, while David was just as absorbed as she was. When the main character got into trouble, he exclaimed seriously like a child, "No, don't go in there. It's clearly a trap." Amara doubled over laughing. "Uncle, it's just a movie." Simone laughed too, surprised and touched. The man who had once told her about his tragedies, who had cried over his losses, was now laughing like a boy at a cartoon. Her heart trembled. He was no longer the distant CEO, but a man learning to live again, finding joy in the small things he once lost with his old family. Some nights Amara went to bed early. Simone and David sat on the balcony, each with a cup of hot tea. The city was quiet, with only the faint sound of traffic drifting from afar. David spoke softly. I'd forgotten this feeling. Coming home, eating dinner, and watching TV with a family. I thought I'd never have it again. Simone was quiet for a moment before answering gently. You don't have to forget. You just have another chance now. Their eyes met. Simone turned away quickly, but her heart beat faster than usual. Bit by bit, she realized she was beginning to feel something for this man. Someone who had once locked his heart behind grief, but was now opening it again, not with grand promises, but with steady, everyday presence. On the weekend, David took them both for a walk along the Charles River. Amara skipped about, her legs still a little weak, but her eyes shining. David walked slowly, watching every step. See? Simone said, half teasing. You've slipped back into the role of a father. David paused, then smiled faintly, eyes still on Amara. I never thought I'd be called that again. But if Amara wants it, I'm ready. Simone looked at him, warmth and uncertainty swirling inside her. He's ready, and maybe I'm starting to be ready to believe, too. That night, after Amara had fallen asleep, Simone tidied the small kitchen. David held up the warped pancake pan from that morning and asked, Should I keep this as a souvenir? The legendary dinosaur pan, Simone laughed. No, throw it out before it becomes evidence of your culinary crimes. He chuckled, then said quietly, sincerely, Thank you. For letting me step in, for letting me live again. Simone was silent for a moment, then nodded. Maybe we're both learning to live again, David. Under the soft golden glow of the little apartment, they smiled at each other, and both knew happiness didn't come only from grand things. It lived in moments as simple as this. The Boston night was quiet, only the faint hum of cars drifting from the streets below. In the small apartment, Amara was fast asleep, hugging her teddy bear tightly. The glow of the nightlight in her room spilled into the living space, making it feel even warmer. Simone sat on the sofa, folding a thin blanket, her eyes flicking toward the clock. David was still sitting there, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. He had been silent for a while, his expression as if wrestling with something buried deep inside. Is something wrong? Simone asked softly, trying to keep her voice calm. David set the cup down on the table and turned fully to her. His eyes were bright, but trembling. Simone, I don't want to just be a guest who comes and goes. I don't want to be the man who brings pizza or walks Amara to school. I want more than that. Simone's heart skipped a beat. You mean, I want to be your husband. And Amara's father, David, cut in, his voice deep and steady, like a vow. The room seemed to hold its breath. Simone's eyes widened, her whole body frozen. She shook her head, her voice breaking. No, David, you don't understand. People will think I'm using you. A simple nurse, a single mother, marrying a millionaire? They'll say I clung to you for money. Your sister and your parents will surely object. I don't want to be the excuse people use to look down on me. David leaned closer, his dark eyes burning with resolve. Listen to me, Simone. For years, I've lived like a body that only breathes. I lost my family, my faith, even myself. You and Amara pulled me out of that abyss. No one else. I don't need the world's approval or anyone's acceptance. I need you. I need Amara. Simone bit her lip, tears rolling down her face. Her voice trembled. Are you sure? You could have someone equal to you who is wealthy and glamorous. No one would question it. And me? I only have a heart that's been tired for too long. David reached for her hand and held it tight. I don't need someone equal on a chart of wealth and status. I need a partner in long nights, in simple meals, in the laughter of Amara. And that person can only be you. Simone broke down, covering her face with her hands. She had no more words to refuse. The walls she had built around her heart for so many years crumbled all at once. You really want this? She whispered. I do, David affirmed. I want to wake up and see you beside me. I want to call Amara my daughter. I want a family again. And this time, I won't lose it. Simone lowered her hands, her eyes red but filled with trust. She nodded gently, her voice choked. Then, I say yes. David pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as if letting go would make the miracle vanish. Simone trembled against him, her heartbeat so loud it seemed Amara in the next room might hear it. He lifted her chin, his gaze tender yet resolute. "I love you, Simone. And I promise to love even the parts of you that you never believed were worthy of love." Before Simone could answer, his lips brushed hers. Tentative at first, a quiet plea. But when she responded softly, the kiss became the truest answer. That they were no longer alone. That in this vast world, they had found each other. Outside the window, Boston glittered with nightlights. Inside the little apartment, a simple kiss marked the beginning of a family. Autumn in Boston was dazzling, with rows of golden red leaves lining the streets of Beacon Hill. But to Simone, that beauty wasn't enough to outweigh the heaviness in her heart. Ever since she accepted David's proposal, she had known storms would come, and they came faster than she expected. One afternoon, just after finishing her hospital shift, Simone was invited to meet at an upscale cafe in Back Bay. The invitation wasn't from David, but from Marcus, his brother, and Mrs. Evelyn David, his mother. Seated across from her, both radiated a cold, aristocratic air. "You're Simone, aren't you?" Mrs. Evelyn began, her voice carrying authority. "A nurse at Boston General Hospital." Simone nodded, trying to remain calm. Marcus leaned forward, eyes fixed on her. "We'll be blunt. David is the heir of Bennett Industries. He needs a wife who matches his stature, someone who can accompany him through international negotiations, not a poor nurse who knows only night shifts and wiping patients' brows." Simone's hand trembled under the table, clenching tightly. Mrs. Evelyn continued, her gaze sharp. "Think about it. What will the press say? Millionaire CEO marries single mother nurse. Absurd. You will tarnish David's reputation. You'll slow his career." Each word cut like a blade. Simone bit her lip, forcing herself to respond. "I never wanted his fame or money. I just wanted a wealthy man to support your daughter?" Marcus cut in, mocking. Simone froze. Tears burned behind her eyes, but pride made her rise to her feet. "I understand. I won't allow myself to be a burden." She left the cafe quickly, her chest heavy. She knew David's family wasn't entirely wrong. She was just a single mother carrying too many burdens. That night in the small apartment, Simone sat watching Amara sleep peacefully in bed. Tears streamed down her face. "Maybe I should step away. I can't be his burden." She thought she needed to find a reason, an excuse to tell David. But David was no fool. By the next day, he knew everything. 2 days later, at the grand gala celebrating the founding of Bennett Industries, the ballroom of the Copley Hotel glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Business leaders, politicians, and media filled the hall. Simone arrived on David's arm, but her heart was tangled with unease. Mrs. Evelyn and Marcus approached, their smiles polite but their eyes cold. Simone almost stepped back, but David gripped her hand firmly as if to say he was ready. When the room hushed to hear his speech, David's voice suddenly rang out. "Some people here may believe Simone, the woman sitting there, is unworthy. That she's just an ordinary nurse, a single mother. But let me make it clear tonight. Simone is not a burden." The hall buzzed with murmurs. David went on, voice resounding, eyes resolute. "She is the one who saved me from loneliness, the reason I'm still standing here. When I lost my family, Simone and Amara gave me a new one. Anyone who insults her insults me." In that moment, the atmosphere broke open. Some guests applauded. Reporters scribbled furiously. Marcus's face stiffened, and Mrs. Evelyn looked briefly unsettled. Simone sat there with tears streaming down her cheeks. Never had a man defended her so fiercely. David turned to her, clasping her hand tightly before everyone. "I choose you, Simone, and I always will." Beneath the glittering lights of the grand gala, his declaration rang out, overturning everything. Simone was no longer an outsider. She was the new heart of David's life and the center of the family they were building together. The applause in the ballroom gradually faded, but Simone's heart still pounded like a drum. She sat there, hands trembling, eyes blurred with tears at David's words. In front of everyone, he hadn't hesitated. He openly declared that she, a simple nurse, was the most important person in his life. Simone's tears streamed uncontrollably. In that moment, she no longer heard the whispers, no longer noticed the scrutinizing stares. All she saw was the man who had pulled her out of the darkness, who held her hand before the world and declared, "Simone is not a burden. Anyone who insults her insults me." Just then, Amara, brought in by Kiana after school, suddenly darted through the rows of seats. She ran straight into her mother's arms, her tiny arms hugging tight. "I knew it," she cried out, her eyes sparkling. "I knew Uncle wouldn't let Mommy go." The ballroom suddenly felt warm. Some guests chuckled, others shook their heads but smiled, while the reporters captured every moment. David bent down, wrapping his arms around both mother and daughter, his embrace like a shield. In front of everyone's eyes, he was no longer the icy CEO, but a man protecting his family. Across the room, Marcus and Mrs. Evelyn stood frozen. Their plan to push Simone away from David had crumbled. They could oppose, they could sneer, but against the force of love and determination, they had no weapon left. David met their gaze, his eyes resolute. "I've already lost one family. I will not let that happen again. If anyone refuses to accept Simone, then they refuse to accept me. And I will never turn my back on the woman who gave me a reason to live." His firm declaration left them speechless. For the first time, Marcus, the brother who used to dictate to him, was silent while Evelyn turned away, her lips pressed tight. When the gala ended, David and Simone walked out together. Amara skipped ahead, her dress twirling under the streetlights. David stopped, turning Simone to face him. "Simone," he said slowly, as if carving each word, "I promise you this. From now on, no one, not even my family, will ever make you feel small again. I will never let you and Amara stand alone." Simone looked into his deep eyes and felt every wall inside her melt away. The years of wondering if she was worthy, if she was a burden, all dissolved. All she saw was a man in love, a father ready to embrace, a steady shoulder to lean on. Tears fell again, but this time they were tears of peace. She nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "I believe you." David leaned down, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. In that moment, Boston seemed to stop, leaving only them and the promise spoken aloud. That night, when the three returned to the small apartment, Amara was still buzzing with excitement, running circles around the living room. "Now Uncle David will stay with us forever, right? No one can send him away anymore." David laughed, sweeping her up in his arms. "That's right. From now on, we'll live true to our hearts, and no one will interfere." Simone watched them, her chest brimming with simple happiness. The little apartment had become a real home, no room for scorn, no place for judgment, only a love that had endured and remained. That night, for the first time in years, Simone slept deeply. In her dreams, she knew she had found the family she and Amara had always deserved. On a June morning, Boston's sky was clear and blue, golden sunlight spilling gently over the small garden in the suburbs where the wedding was held. There was no grand ballroom, no hundreds of guests, just a warm, simple ceremony with Simone's close friends, a few nurse colleagues, several of David's longtime associates, and even the reserved presence of Mrs. Evelyn and Marcus, his mother and brother. They sat in the back row, faces stern, eyes unreadable. Simone glanced briefly in their direction, her heart tightening, but then she clasped David's hand. He leaned down and whispered, "Look only at me and Amara. Leave the rest to me." The piano began to play. Amara, in her little princess dress, carried a basket of roses, scattering bright petals along the aisle. Her face shone with pride. As she tossed the flowers, she called out loudly, "Everyone, look! This is my daddy." The whole garden burst into laughter, the atmosphere suddenly lighter and warmer. Some guests snapped photos and applause rippled. In the back row, Evelyn stiffened. She hadn't heard a child call her son daddy with such pride since Rachel and the little granddaughter were lost in that accident years ago. Her vision blurred with tears. Under the floral arch, Simone appeared in a simple white dress, not extravagant, but pure and radiant. David stood waiting, his eyes never leaving her. He squeezed Amara's hand lightly, then extended his other hand toward Simone. When their hands met, the entire garden fell silent. The officiant began, but David asked to speak first. His gaze swept the crowd, pausing briefly on his family, then returned to Simone. I once thought success meant standing alone at the top, proving I was stronger than my pain. But I was wrong. True success is having someone to hold hands with, to share everything with. Simone, you and Amara have given me a new family, and today I promise never to lose it. His words carried in the wind. Tears glistened in Simone's eyes as she replied softly, David, you've given me more than love. You've given Amara a father. From now on, we will never be alone again. Applause erupted. Amara shouted, now we're really a family. In the back row, Evelyn's hands trembled around her small clutch. Tears slid down before she could stop them. She had lost a daughter-in-law, a granddaughter. For years, she had clung to David, trying to mold him into the perfect heir, just to avoid losing him too. But today, seeing his radiant smile, a smile she thought she'd never see again, she finally understood. She had been wrong. When the ring exchange ended, she rose slowly and stepped forward. Guests murmured in surprise. Simone froze. Evelyn stopped in front of her son and new daughter-in-law, her voice trembling. My son, I was too harsh. I was afraid of losing you again, so I tried to stop this. But now I see. Simone brought you back to us. I'm sorry. Simone was speechless. In that moment, Evelyn took her hand and squeezed it tightly, her eyes sincere. Marcus followed behind his mother, his face awkward. But when Amara tugged at his hand and chirped, Uncle Marcus, you're my uncle now, right? He laughed, ruffling her curls. All right then. I'll try to be a good uncle. Laughter rippled through the garden, the tension melting away. The reception afterward was simple but full of joy. Kiana raised her glass. Today my sister didn't just gain a husband, she gained a family. And I believe from now on she'll never have to carry everything alone. David wrapped an arm around Simone, leaning close to whisper, I promised, didn't I? I'll never let you feel less again. You're the most important person. Simone rested her head on his shoulder, smiling through her tears. Later in the afternoon, when the guests had gone, the three of them sat on the grass. Amara hugged both her parents, her eyes sparkling with happiness. Now we're really a family, she cried, her smile brighter than the sunset. David looked at Simone, then at their little girl. For the first time in years, the painful past no longer haunted him. He had stepped out of the darkness to begin a new journey, not alone, but with the two people he loved most. And in that moment, he finally understood. Success wasn't standing alone at the top. It was having a hand to hold and a family to share it with.